years. That's the Air Force position. And it's wrong. It's just an outright lie, and it's outrageous. That's why, we're also talking about excessive government security here. We're talking about our democracy. We have a right to demand our government to tell us the truth. Our government should not be lying to us. After all, they're supposed to be working for us. So that's the other issue here that's important, is excessive government secrecy.
Well, in a perfect world, we should expect this full disclosure, but we're not in that perfect world, Robert.
No, we're not.
Are scientists getting involved in this, either in a clandestine way or publicly?
Well, you know about Leslie Kean's new book.
Yeah, she was on too.
And I was really heartened to see Dr. Michio Kaku come forward and support the possibility, support her in her book. And so I think more and more scientists are starting to think twice about this. Of course, most of them, nearly all of them, want to hold on to their jobs, and they don't want to be laughed at. So, the other issue is, can we get this thing off the laugh track and get a more serious conversation going? And when we do, I think more and more scientists will want to look into this, because there are cases that science can look at. Even in my case, there's a lot of technical documentation available. We can demand more, technical reports that were written on our case, and it could be looked at in a scientific way.
So you do not believe that these ETs were attacking us?
No, I don't think they were attacking us. They obviously have the ability to disrupt our electronics, and if they wanted to attack us, I think what they could do is just shut down nuclear missiles all over the country and keep them shut down, and then they would disable our nuclear arsenal. But what they simply did was make a demonstration that they could do it, but also I think it was a message, and that was get rid of your nukes. They're not going to do you any good.
Do you think governments around this planet where this has happened probably have talked to each other going, you know what, they could shut us down in a second, all of us. We got to get smart. You would think they would be saying that.
Yes. I think there are conversations going on between governments on the UFO issue. Of course, I'm not privy to any of that, so I don't know what that conversation is like.
Robert, think back 43 years.
Uh-huh.
What would you do differently, knowing what you know now, 43 years ago?
Well, what I would do differently is try to demand that we get some answers as to what exactly happened and why. The investigation that was going on, we should have been briefed on the investigation going on at the time. Of course, as a military person, you just have to follow orders, and you can't do much demanding about anything.
Would you have still signed that security oath?
Would I have signed a security oath?
At that time, yeah.
I really had no choice. Yeah, I guess I would have. I sure would have. I would have probably done the same thing. Yeah.
Has anybody been emotional over this? You or the other 6 witnesses? Where it's affected your life?
Emotional. Well,
I mean, sometimes you would think, if you were faced with the true reality that there's extraterrestrial life out there, and you truly knew that, I think it would be pretty emotional.
Yeah. I can tell you that guards. We sent out 2 guards to one of the launch facilities where we had security violations, and they saw UFOs over the sites at those locations. And when they came back, they were really shook up, and they had to be removed from alert status. In other words, they had to be taken off the job because they were so distraught and fearful over the whole thing.
All right, Robert, stay with us. We're going to bring Yvonne Smith back with you for some phone calls now for the final hour. And by the way, you can go to another website, UFOhastings.com, UFOhastings.com, to get more information on that Washington Press Club conference. We'll be back. Okay, this hour we're going to take your phone calls, both with Robert Salas and Yvonne Smith. They're standing by, so get ready on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. Yvonne, you were right. Robert's story is truly something else, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes, I told you.
Gosh. Now, you have not had to hypnotherapy him, have you?
No, I have not.
Would that be beneficial? I mean, he has full recollection of things.
Many people, a good percentage of people have conscious memory of their experiences. But sometimes they want to make sure that they are remembering everything. I mean, they just need to know. So that's when they'll come to me and they want to try hypnotic regression. But if someone's satisfied with their conscious memory, then I just advise them to just leave it alone, and they can seek out help later if they need to. But conscious memory is fine. Many people have that.
And Robert, I hope you get some major media at this September 27th event.
Thank you, George. That's what we're hoping.
Let's take some of the calls. We'll go to Leonard in Eugene, Oregon, west of the Rockies. Hi, Leonard. You're on with us.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for taking my call, George.
Sure thing.
I actually live in Eugene, Oregon. There's an artist who drew a picture of an ET in the window. I live in the same city. I'm 26. I'm Generation X. I'd like to start this story off by saying about 20 years ago, I lived on Fox Hollow Road, and I was 7. My sister, she was about 14 or 15, and she came to me one night and said, "Hey, Len, Dad said it was okay for you to help me doing my paper route, only on the weekends because I was young." I said, "All right." And as she walked out of the room, I was getting in my bed. She said, "Oh, and Len, there's these things in the sky." And when she said that, I was 7. I didn't think anything of it. All I knew is early in the morning, dark, I was going to take my bike, ride it down the middle of the street with my sister, no dad around. Awesome. So I didn't think anything of it. When we got there, when you go and do a paper route, you have a drop box where you pick up your papers. As soon as we got there, I heard the things in the sky. And I want to give an illustration. It sounded like a fire extinguisher when you pull the trigger and it makes that noise.
Yeah.
Very loud. I looked up in the sky and I saw a trail of smoke, white smoke. And I said, "Whoa, what's that?" She said, "I told you, Len, there are things in the sky." And so on that specific road, it's Oregon. There are huge trees. We couldn't see above us very well. She said, "Let's go ahead and deliver these papers. At the end, it opens up. We'll take a look." So we did. We got to the end where Fox Hollow Road and Pinecrest is. We stood at a stop sign. We looked down the street. I saw this is a true story, we saw about 20 to 30 cats in the middle of the road. Some were laying down, some were standing, some were just sitting there, some were looking up in the sky. And we said, me and my sister told each other, they must hear them too. That's when we got distracted because those things started moving up in the sky, and we got terrified because we realized there was more than one. There was about 3 or 4 of them. We could only see the trails of smoke they were leaving, but they were doing zigzag patterns. And I looked down at the ground. I looked up at my sister. I saw her go, and that's all I remember from that point. I don't remember walking past the cat. But here's my question. That same year, I went into foster care, never got to think about that again. My life changed. And a couple of years ago, I had my first son, my firstborn son.
Well, congratulations on him.
Thank you. Well, it was late at night. He was 3 months old. He's around 2.5 right now. And I woke up in the middle of the night around 3 o'clock, and I had the weirdest feeling. My body was tingling. I felt like somebody was going to break into my house. I know that sounds weird, but I checked all the windows. I turned off all the lights so I could look outside the window and make sure nobody could see me. And I kept walking around my small apartment. And when I walked back into the living room where my son's crib was, there was this black shadow figure. I know everybody here is aware of the cartoon figure, the Grim Reaper, the black robed figure with the... He didn't have a staff. It was just a black robed figure looking down at my son. I stood there for 2 seconds. It hovered all the way across the room, vanished through the wall. I stood there. I went and touched my son, made sure he was alive. I had no clue. I didn't tell my wife. I laid back down and went to bed. It sounds like the weirdest thing somebody would do. I always told myself if I ever saw a ghost, I'd get out of the house, I'd just run. Well, I started doing investigating, and the more investigating I did, the more and more I started looking into it, I heard of the term shadow people. And that's when I started listening to your show, George. And ETs kept coming up. ETs kept coming up. And that's when I started thinking about my ET experience.
Do you think you were abducted, Leonard?
Absolutely. And that's where I want to get to. After this had happened, I never told a soul. I just started looking into it slowly. Well, one day, one evening, I did security work at this time, working graveyard at a college. That's why I loved listening to your show while I was working. It was great.
It's the best at night.
It's the best. Well, I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I heard this come from the back of my head. Boop, boop. Instantly, back of my head got numb, got nauseous to my stomach. Didn't know what to think of it. Just walked outside, started talking to my family. Didn't tell them a thing. Didn't want to think about it. Didn't know what to think about it. A month later, I was laying my son down to bed to take a nap, and I heard this come from my head. Now, this lasted a good 30 to 45 seconds. And I was about to jump up and run out and tell my wife, and I said, what are you going to tell her? You're hearing a noise from your head? And I said, no, study this noise and just listen to it. Well, within the next couple of months, I heard that exact same noise come from my car when I would be listening to the Coast to Coast. It started popping in through my speakers. One time, I got out of my car. I had a Walkman, a tape player Walkman. People say, why are you carrying that around? Because they have an AM player. MP3 players nowadays don't, but those old disc players do. That noise came from my headphones, and that's when I realized something really strange was going on. And that's why I wanted to ask you,
and let's do that for Yvonne, yeah. Yeah,
I want to do this for Yvonne. Have you ever heard of anybody hearing a transmission noise coming from the back of their head like that? I'll be honest with you, I kept this secret for a year at least. My wife started noticing that I was investigating, looking at different groups and chats, and she was like, okay.
What are you doing? Who you seeing? Yeah.
I finally said, fine, I'll tell you. And this is when I was working security, leaving at night, and she was terrified. She never wanted to hear a thing about it.
Let's start with the beeps first, Yvonne. Have you heard that before from some of your other patients?
I'm trying to think back at some of my cases. I know that with these suspected implants, people have heard certain tones. Now, I'm not saying that specifically what you heard. Of course, I have dealt with so many cases that it's on the top of my head. It's hard to remember that exactly, but they have heard tones, and they've actually have heard someone communicating to them, and we feel that is part of the reason for the implant.
And he was so vivid with those tones, too.
Yes, they're clear. It's almost, I know I had one client say that he felt that there was communication